Imagine you have two choices for a workout today.
Okay, I'm listening.
Right, so option one is like 20 minutes of just agonizing, near maximum sprints, the kind that leave you totally gasping for air.
Oh, sounds brutal.
Yeah, exactly. But then option two is a slow, easy 20-minute walk.
Well, logically, the walk sounds infinitely more pleasant. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
You would think so, right? But a really fascinating new study proves that your brain actually prefers the agonizing sprints.
Hey, really?
Yeah, and, the reason why completely flips our understanding of what makes a workout, quote-unquote, hard.
That is wild.
It is. So our required focus for today's session is a brand new study. The title is quite a mouthful, but it's called Effective High-Intensity Interval Exercise versus Continuous Low-Intensity Aerobic Exercise with Blood Flow Restriction on Psychophysiological Responses. A randomized crossover study.
Yeah, it is a dense title, but honestly, the research inside is just a massive step forward in understanding human motivation.
Absolutely.
And just to give the listeners some background, this was published in the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine in 2024. It was authored by Victor S. de Queiros, along with, a pretty prominent team of international researchers.
Right. I saw a few big names in there.
Yeah, people like Nicholas Rolnick, Angelo Sabag, and several others spanning from Brazil, the U.S., Australia, and the U.K.
A really global effort. So our mission today for this deep dive is to take a rigorously academic yet, highly accessible approach to evaluating what this team actually found.
Because they do two very popular, highly time-efficient exercise strategies, right?
Exactly. Breathless sprinting on one hand and a slow walk utilizing blood flow restriction on the other. And they just tested them head to head.
Which is such a cool premise.
It really is. And the goal wasn't just to see, which one burns more energy or builds more muscle. The researchers were hunting for the psychological secret to exercise adherence.
Right, like what makes you actually go back to the gym?
Yes. They wanted to figure out which of these vastly different workouts actually creates the neural architecture that makes you want to wake up and do it all over again.
That is the million-dollar question in fitness, honestly.
Truly. Okay, let's unpack this.
So, to truly grasp the gravity of these findings, we need to first define the two radically different workouts these participants were put through.
Right, because they're polar opposites.
Exactly. And then we'll break down the psychological framework that basically dictates how you experience any form of physical effort.
Okay, so who did they actually test this on?
So the researchers brought in 10 healthy men, averaging about 25 years old, who were explicitly categorized as untrained.
Okay, that untrained classification is a vital detail for you to keep in mind as you're listening.
Yeah, very important.
Because these are not, elite endurance athletes or professional bodybuilders. Those guys have spent years conditioning their brains to tolerate massive amounts of physical suffering.
Right. Their baseline for pain is totally skewed.
Yeah. Exactly. These are regular individuals, which makes their psychological responses far more applicable to the average person, like you or me.
For sure. So these men were randomly assigned to complete 2 different treadmill routines on separate days. And a crucial control in this study was that both routines were work-matched.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning the overall external mechanical work, so the physical intensity multiplied by the duration, was equalized. And both took exactly 20 minutes to complete.
Okay, got it. So apples to apples on the actual workload.
Right. So the first routine was high-intensity interval exercise, or HIIE. After a standardized warm-up, the participants performed 10 separate 1-minute sprints.
Wow, 10 of them.
Yeah, and these sprints were set at 80% of their peak running velocity.
I mean, pushing at 80% of your absolute maximum speed for a full minute is a massive physiological shock.
Oh, totally brutal.
To survive 10 rounds of that, they must have had some kind of recovery built in, right?
They did. They had exactly 1 minute of passive rest between each sprint.
Passive rest meaning?
Meaning they just stood on the treadmill, they just let their heart rate settle a bit before the belt sped up again.
Okay, that makes sense. And then what was the second routine?
So the second routine was designed to be the polar opposite. This was low-intensity aerobic exercise with blood flow restriction, which they refer to as LIAE, BFR.
That's a mouthful, too.
Oh, yeah, lots of acronyms today. In this protocol, the participants walked continuously for the entire 20 minutes, but at a much slower, very manageable pace, only 40% of their peak running velocity.
I mean, a 20-minute stroll at 40% of your max speed sounds like a cool down.
Right.
It doesn't even sound like a workout. But the blood flow restriction is the variable that changes the entire mechanical environment of the lower body, doesn't it?
It changes everything.
Yeah.
Because while they walked, they wore bilateral pneumatic cuffs. They look similar to a blood pressure cuff on the upper portion of both thighs.
Okay, so just strapped right up near the hips.
Exactly. And these cuffs were inflated to 50% of their arterial occlusion pressure.
Okay, you're just gonna have to break down the mechanics of that for us.
No problem. So your arteries are situated deep within the tissue, right? And they pump oxygenated blood down into your legs under high pressure.
Right, coming from the heart.
Yeah. But your veins are closer to the surface, and they pump the deoxygenated blood back up to your heart under much lower pressure.
Okay, tracking with you.
So pumping the cuffs to 50% of arterial occlusion pressure basically means they are tight enough to completely pinch off the superficial veins, but loose enough to let the deep arteries keep pumping blood in.
Oh, wow. So the blood gets pumped down into the legs, but it has almost no way to escape.
Exactly. It's trapped.
So you're essentially trapping all that fluid and metabolic waste right in the working muscles for 20 minutes.
Yep. A whole time.
To understand why researchers would, compare a breathless sprint to a chemically trapped walk, we really have to look at the psychology of how the brain perceives effort.
Which brings us to a foundational concept in exercise psychology called the dual mode theory.
Right. Break that down for us.
So, the dual mode theory explains how our brain generates positive or negative feelings during physical exertion. Psychologists refer to this as affective valence.
Basically, whether you feel good or miserable while you're working out.
Exactly. And according to this theory, the way you feel is governed by a constant tug of war between two very different input sources.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, you have cognitive parameters. This is the activity happening in your prefrontal cortex. It's your rational brain saying, I am exercising, I am taking control of my health, I am building discipline.
Oh, I know that voice. It's the internal monologue that feels proud of you for just showing up, right?
Yes.
It's like you put your gym clothes on and it's entirely logic-based. This is good for me.
Precisely. But then the second input source involves interoceptive signals.
Interoceptive, okay.
Yeah, these are the raw, unfiltered physical data points that your body's survival dashboard is sending straight up to the brain.
We're talking about, like, what?
Like rising core temperature, the mechanical stretch of your lungs, the accumulation of acid in your muscles.
The physical reality of the workout.
Right. And the dual mode theory posits that when exercise intensity crosses a certain threshold, these interoceptive distress signals become so loud and overwhelming that they completely drown out your rational cognitive thoughts.
Okay, so the physical reality of your lungs burning basically just deletes the higher level thought of, hey, I'm doing a great job for my long-term health.
Exactly. The brain shifts from a logic state into a total survival state. And that triggers a deeply negative emotional response to the workout.
Wow, okay, so that survival override is why high-intensity exercise is notorious for making people feel miserable in the moment.
Yes, and it's why so many people abandon strenuous fitness programs altogether. The negative affect generated by those interoceptive signals is just incredibly powerful.
Well, if we apply the dual mode theory to these two protocols, the high-intensity intervals sound like grabbing a live wire.
Pretty much.
I mean, it's an instant shock to the system. You're breathing hard, your heart is pounding, and the interoceptive signals are just screaming at you.
Yeah, they're off the charts.
But then the blood flow restriction walk is just a slow stroll. I know the cuffs are tight, making the legs heavy, but it is still only 40% of their peak velocity.
True.
So I actually have to push back on the premise here a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
If the BFR walk is just a continuous, low-intensity movement, wouldn't the dual mode theory confidently predict that it stays safely in the cognitive zone?
That's a very logical assumption.
Right, because it's just a walk. So your brain should be perfectly happy patting itself on the back, creating way more positive vibes than agonizing sprinting.
And testing that exact hypothesis is the entire core value of this study.
Ah, okay.
To determine if the psychological theory holds up against the physical reality, we have to actually examine the objective physiological toll these two different workouts took on the subjects' bodies.
So we need to see if the blood flow restriction somehow tricked the body into thinking a casual walk was actually a heavy sprint.
Exactly. Because since the dual mode theory relies on physical stress to trigger those negative feelings, we have to look at how much systemic stress was actually occurring.
Right. Did the BFR walk trick the heart into working as hard as the sprint?
Well, the heart rate data shows a massive divide.
I bet.
The researchers monitored cardiac output continuously, and the high-intensity group averaged 80% of their peak heart rate across the entire session.
Man, an 80% average means your chest is actively pounding.
Oh, yeah,
You are heavily winded, probably struggling to even hold a basic conversation at that point.
definitely. But then compare that to the BFR walking group. They averaged just 58% of their peak heart rate.
58%?
Yeah. So the physical stress on the central cardiovascular system was undeniably greater during the sprints. It elicited significantly higher heart rates at every single time point they analyzed.
I mean, 58% is closer to brisk window shopping than a grueling workout.
It really is.
So with the heart working that much harder to deliver oxygen during the sprints, the metabolic byproducts must be completely different as well, right?
Totally. The researchers measured capillary blood lactate, which is, the chemical signature we often associate with that intense burning feeling in the muscles.
Oh, like the lactic acid burn.
Yeah. And they used a portable analyzer to measure lactate before and immediately after the exercise. The high-intensity intervals caused a massive absolute change.
Oh, massive.
The sprint group saw their blood lactate jump by about 3.6 millimoles per liter,
Wow. Okay.
which is a clear chemical indicator of severe muscular stress. But the walking group, they barely registered a 1.0 millimole per liter increase.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Chemically speaking, on a systemic level, their bodies barely registered that they were exercising at all.
So the sprints spiked the heart rate into the cardiovascular red zone and flooded the system with lactate. We know they were working harder systemically.
Undeniably.
But did the localized restriction in the BFR group cause more actual muscle damage? Because of the cuffs.
Good question. So the researchers measured acute muscle fatigue by having the men perform a maximum isometric voluntary contraction.
Okay, what does that look like?
Basically, they were strapped into a chair and told to kick out and extend their leg as hard as they possibly could against a static load cell. And they did this both before and after the workout.
Just to see how much strength they lost?
Exactly. And surprisingly, neither the sprinting protocol nor the blood flow restriction walk caused any significant decline in maximum strength post-exercise.
Wait, really? Neither of them?
Nope. The localized muscle fatigue was statistically similar.
This raises an important question, though.
It definitely does.
If the blood flow restriction walk was massively less demanding on the heart, produced almost no systemic lactate, and didn't result in any extra muscle fatigue, why did the researchers even test it as a comparable alternative to high-intensity sprinting?
Because blood flow restriction is fundamentally designed to create localized metabolic stress without triggering systemic cardiovascular stress.
Okay, explain that a bit more.
Well, because those pneumatic cuffs trap the blood in the legs, the leg muscles are forced to work in a hypoxic or low oxygen environment.
Right, since fresh blood isn't circulating properly.
Exactly. And this simulates the cellular stress of heavy lifting or intense running directly at the site of the muscle, but it doesn't require the lungs and heart to work at maximum capacity to achieve it.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's essentially a biological hack. Theoretically, it's giving you the localized benefits of high-intensity training while bypassing all that full-body exhaustion.
Right. Okay, so the objective data on the spreadsheet is totally clear. Physically, the overall engine worked vastly harder during the sprints.
Oh, absolutely.
The heart was beating much faster, the blood was pumping far more lactate. But, how a workout affects your physiology and how you actually perceive that workout are often two entirely different things.
And that is exactly where things get complicated.
Right, because we are moving from the hard data of heart rates into the perception paradox, the messy, subjective human experience of physical effort.
Yeah. So the researchers asked the men to quantify their subjective experience during the workouts by rating two distinct feelings:
Which
their perceived exertion and their perceived pain.
Okay.
They used the classic Borg scale to measure the rating of perceived exertion, or RPE. Now, the Borg scale is a bit unique. It runs from 6 to 20.
Which is kind of an odd range.
It is, but it was originally designed to roughly correlate with a heart rate of 60 to 200 beats per minute.
Oh, clever. Okay.
So they asked the participants to rate how hard it was to drive their legs and how heavy their breathing felt.
Well, knowing that the physiological data showed this massive chasm between the two groups, like the sprinters operating at an 80% heart rate while the walkers coasted at 58%, you would fully expect the RPE scores to reflect that massive gap.
You'd think so. Yet the subjective reporting completely defied the physiological data.
How so?
By the final minute of the exercise, both groups reported virtually the exact same level of exertion.
Are you kidding?
Not at all. They both anchored around a 12 or 13 on the Borg scale, which translates to somewhat hard.
But wait, If the heart rate and lactate data unequivocally prove the sprinters were doing massively more cardiovascular work, how is it neurologically possible that the walkers felt they were working just as hard?
Well, the mechanism behind that perceived exertion becomes super evident when we look at the second subjective metric.
Which is the pain scale.
Exactly. The rating of perceived pain, or RPP, this was measured on a standard 0 to 10 scale, and it focused specifically on the anterior region of their thighs.
Okay, the quads.
Yeah. And when asked to quantify their localized muscular pain, the results completely inverted.
Oh, wow.
The perceived pain was significantly higher during the low-intensity blood flow restriction walk than during the high-intensity sprints.
So a slow walk with a 58% heart rate caused more active pain than breathless sprinting.
Yep.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What on earth is happening inside the nervous system to make a low-intensity movement feel so agonizing?
So the researchers point to the afferent feedback model to explain this phenomenon. We have to go back to the mechanics of those pneumatic cuffs.
Right, the restricted blood flow.
Yeah, they were severely reducing venous return. All those metabolic byproducts, the hydrogen ions, the trapped fluids created by the working leg muscles, they simply cannot escape back into the systemic circulation.
So the waste is just pooling and compounding inside the tissue of the thigh.
Exactly. So even though their lungs weren't burning and their core temperature wasn't spiking, the localized accumulation of metabolites was incredibly intense.
Which sends a signal to the brain, I'm guessing.
Yes. It simulated the group 3 and 4 of FERT nerves.
Okay.
These are the specific neural pathways responsible for sending sensory distress signals from the muscle tissue directly back to the central nervous system.
Oh, I see.
So the localized hypoxia and fluid pressure created this continuous barrage of pain signals shooting up to the brain, which made that slow walk feel incredibly uncomfortable and ultimately drove up their perception of how hard they were actually working.
Wow. Let me frame this with an analogy for you listening, because the distinction between systemic exhaustion and localized pain is so vital here.
Go for it.
Imagine you have to move some boxes. The high-intensity sprint is like picking up a 100-pound box, carrying it as fast as you can up a steep flight of stairs, and then putting it down to rest for a minute.
Right. It's a huge burst of effort.
Exactly. It is systemically exhausting. Your heart rate spikes, you are gasping for air, but you get to drop the weight and recover.
Right. The exertion is high, but the mechanical tension has a clear, defined endpoint.
Exactly. Now, the blood flow restriction walk is like carrying a much lighter, say, 20-pound box, but you have to walk around with it for 20 straight minutes, and you are never allowed to put it down.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
It is. The weight feels completely manageable for the first few minutes, But around minute 10, your forearms are burning. By minute 15, the lactic acid pooling in your biceps is screaming.
Yeah, it just builds and builds.
By minute 19, that dull ache has become a sharp, agonizing fire. The localized, unrelenting pain of holding that constant tension completely overrides the fact that the box itself isn't actually that heavy.
That analogy perfectly isolates the difference in the sensory experience.
It's all about the duration of the tension.
Exactly. The trapped metabolites in the BFR walk created a constant, unbroken sensory discomfort that simply never let up.
Right.
Which brings us to the ultimate test of the study, psychological adherence.
Because the most biomechanically perfect workout in the world is completely useless if it makes you so miserable that you quit by week 2,
Yeah,
right?
like bingo. So the researchers measured the psychological aftermath 10 minutes after the workouts ended.
Once the cuffs were off and everyone's heart rates had returned to baseline.
Yes. They evaluated affect, which is essentially a measure of mood and emotional valence on a feeling scale from -5 to +5.
Okay, so just how good or bad they felt.
Right. And they also measured future intention to exercise, or FIE. This uses the Juster scale from 0 to 10 to ask how likely the participant is to voluntarily perform that exact workout again in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, the real test of adherence. So what happened?
The results of those psychological surveys were definitive, and they heavily favored the more systemically taxing workout.
The sprints.
Yeah. The high-intensity interval exercise resulted in significantly higher positive affect.
Wow.
The participants reported feeling vastly better, more positive, and more emotionally elevated after completing those grueling sprints.
And their intention to actually do it again?
The future intention to exercise scores were also significantly higher for the sprints.
That is just so counterintuitive.
I know. Despite the 80% heart rate and the massive lactate spike, they were far more willing to sign up for another round of high-intensity intervals than endure another 20-minute walk with the cuffs.
What's fascinating here is the underlying psychology of why the brain categorizes these experiences this way.
Yeah.
Like, why does the human nervous system prefer the intense shock of the sprints over the slow, accumulating torture chamber of the BFR walk?
Well, the researchers highlight two major psychological mechanisms driving this preference. The first is the rebound effect, and the second is self-efficacy.
Okay, let's start with the rebound effect.
So the rebound effect is tied directly to the pacing of the stimulus. During the high-intensity intervals, you have 1 minute of intense physical struggle, followed immediately by 1 minute of complete passive rest.
Right.
When that severe interoceptive distress suddenly ceases, the central nervous system experiences a massive neurochemical rush of relief and pleasure.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean. It is the exact same psychological mechanism as carrying all of the heavy grocery bags from the car to the kitchen in one massive, painful trip.
Yes, the one-trip challenge.
Right. The physical strain of the plastic handles digging into your hands is awful, but the psychological high of finally dropping those bags on the kitchen counter is incredibly rewarding.
Exactly. It's the contrast that creates the reward. In the sprint protocol, the participants receive 10 distinct moments of that neurochemical relief throughout the workout.
Oh, because of the rest intervals.
Right. But the BFR walk offered 0 breaks.
No.
It was 20 minutes of monotonous, unbroken, slowly compounding discomfort. There was no contrast, and therefore no moment of psychological relief until the very end of the whole session.
Man, the brain really needs those valleys of recovery to process the peaks of the effort.
Absolutely.
With the walk, it was just a slow climb into pain without any release valve.
Yeah.
You also mentioned self-efficacy, though. How does that factor into the sprinters feeling better about the workout?
So self-efficacy is basically the psychological momentum we build when we successfully overcome a distinct challenge.
Like checking things off a to-do list.
Exactly. High-intensity intervals inherently gamify the workout. You are conquering miniature, clearly defined hurdles.
Just 30 more seconds, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Your brain registers, I just survived sprint number 3, I just conquered sprint number 4. Each individual interval you complete boosts your confidence and provides a tangible psychological win.
And the continuous walk doesn't offer those distinct milestones of victory.
Not at all. There are no levels to beat. It simply feels like a long, painful chore.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
That's the real takeaway.
If you are trying to construct a fitness routine that you will actually stick to for years to come, you might be tempted to look for a physiological shortcut.
It's natural to want the easy way.
Right. You might think, I don't want to sweat profusely and gasp for air. I'll just do a low-intensity BFR walk. It's scientifically proven to be easier on the lungs and the heart.
But this study proves that prioritizing a cardiovascular shortcut over psychological pacing will likely backfire.
Yes. Because if the perceived pain of trapped metabolites and the lack of distinct recovery periods makes the workout feel like a miserable, unbroken chore, your brain will subconsciously build resistance to it.
We'll just find excuses not to do it.
Exactly. Your brain actually prefers a hard, systemically taxing battle as long as that battle is broken up with built-in victories and distinct moments of rest.
It's all about how it's packaged.
Yeah. It vastly prefers the sprint and recover model over enduring low-grade, constant discomfort that never offers a moment of relief.
You know, if we connect this physiological data to the bigger picture of human motivation, it suggests that our willingness to engage in hard things is not strictly tied to minimizing the total mechanical work.
That's profound, actually.
It's heavily tied to the psychological pacing of the effort, the structural oscillation of high-intensity intervals. That aggressive swing between intense work and total relief seems to map perfectly onto how our brains process struggle and reward effort.
That is such a vital takeaway for how we structure all of our habits, really. We set out today to find the psychological secret to adherence between two highly efficient exercise models.
And the data delivered.
It did. The objective data shows that while blood flow restriction walking is undeniably less taxing on your cardiovascular system, keeping your heart rate low and your systemic lactate practically at baseline, the psychological toll of continuous trapped pain makes it deeply unenjoyable.
No one wants to do that again.
Right. High-intensity sprinting, despite the heavy breathing and the racing heart, is the unexpected, definitive winner for generating positive affect and future motivation.
These findings really challenge our fundamental everyday assumptions about what constitutes a hard task.
They really do.
The systemic physiological strain was demonstrably higher in the sprints, but the localized perceptual strain, that unbroken pain, was far worse in the walk.
Which raises a really provocative thought for you to take away and mull over as you go about your day.
I love this part.
If our brains inherently reward us more for overcoming brief, intense struggles than they do for enduring low-grade, constant discomfort, where else in our lives are we choosing the wrong kind of easy path?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Right, like how often do we avoid having a sharp, intense, uncomfortable conversation in a relationship, or maybe tackling a massive project at work, only to saddle ourselves with a dull, constant ache of background stress that we can never put down?
We choose the 20-minute walk with the heavy cuffs when we should just do the sprint and get the relief.
Exactly. The mechanics of physical exertion beautifully mirror the mechanics of psychological resilience. The contrast between intense effort and distinct rest is where the growth and the satisfaction truly happens.
That's so well said.
Thank you. Well, before we sign off, I want to bring our focus back to the incredible academic work that made today's discussion possible. I highly encourage you to read the full original article by Queiros and his international team in the Journal of Sport Science and Medicine.
It is definitely worth a read.
Looking at the exact feeling scales, the heart rate data charts, and the precise methodology they used for the occlusion pressure is deeply satisfying if you really want to understand the biomechanics of this study.
Oh, for sure. There's a wealth of detail in there about how they anchored the pain scales and monitored the localized fatigue. It is a rigorously designed, randomized crossover study, and it contributes a vital piece to the complex puzzle of exercise prescription and behavioral psychology.
It absolutely does. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the mechanics of human motivation, please make sure to follow the channel and turn on your notifications.
We'd love to have you back.
We are constantly digging into the cutting-edge research that shapes your world, and we want you here with us so you never miss a breakthrough. So, next time you are faced with a choice between the 100-pound box and the 20-pound box you can never put down, maybe try taking the heavy one up the stairs.
Your brain might just thank you for it afterward.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next Deep